An infected ant abandons its colony before death. A bumblebee carrying a parasite inside its body chooses the cold outside the nest. But what about the animals who live beside us? Why do some animals or insects leave before they die? Let's look at what science actually knows. When a beloved animal disappears near the end of its life, people often tell themselves the same story. It knew. It found a quiet place. It did not want to be seen suffering. Maybe it did not want the people it loved to watch it die. It is one of the most painful ideas we carry about animals, and one of the hardest to prove. Because sometimes, animals really do leave before death. But the reason they leave may be stranger, colder, and in some species, more selfless than we imagine. The image usually begins with a cat. An old cat who has slept on the same windowsill for 15 years suddenly stops coming when called. It slips beneath a porch, behind a shed, into a corner of the garden no one thought to search until it is too late. To the person searching, that absence feels deliberate, like the animal chose not to make them witness the end. But in dogs and cats, science does not show a planned farewell. Veterinarians see something less poetic and more physical. Terminally ill animals may withdraw and hide, or they may become restless and cling more closely than before. Long before an animal is dying, illness can reorganize its behavior. Researchers call this sickness behavior, reduced movement, appetite, grooming, and social interest when the body is fighting disease. It is not simply weakness, it can be an evolved way of conserving resources while the immune system works. For a failing animal, darkness and stillness may reduce stimulation. In the wild, hiding can also reduce the risk of being noticed while injured or unable to defend itself. A cat beneath a porch may not be thinking, "I am going away to die." It may be following an older instruction. When the body fails, get out of sight. But in a few animals, the evidence goes further. They do not merely hide because they are weak. They remove themselves from their society as death approaches. In 2010, researchers studied tiny ants called Temnothorax unifasciatus. Their colonies live in narrow spaces where workers constantly touch, feed, and groom one another. For an infection, it is an ideal place to spread. Some workers were infected with a lethal fungus. Others were not infected, but had their remaining lifespan shortened experimentally. The result was the same. Before they died, the ants left the nest. They stopped social contact. They moved away from the chamber where their sisters remained alive. And they were not being expelled. That detail mattered. If only infected ants had left, the behavior could have been a side effect of infection or manipulation by the fungus. But uninfected ants close to death withdrew too. The researchers argued that this may be self-removal, a dying worker reducing the risk her body could bring to the colony. An ant does not need to understand death to behave in a way shaped by it. She only needs to leave before what is happening inside her reaches everyone else. For an animal whose whole life has served a colony, dying alone may be the final job. Bumblebees reveal a different version of the same problem. Some bumblebees are attacked by conopid flies. The fly lays an egg inside the bee, and the developing parasite eventually kills its host. Researchers found that parasitized workers were more likely to spend the night outside the nest, where temperatures were lower. At first, it looks like the familiar story again, a dying animal leaving home. But the cold mattered. Lower temperatures slowed the parasite developing inside the bee. By remaining outside, the infected worker entered conditions that were worse for the parasite, even when those conditions were dangerous for herself. Scientists cannot call that sacrifice in the human sense. The bee may not know what is inside her, or what her absence means, but the pattern is real. An animal carrying a lethal parasite changes where it goes, and the place it chooses makes life harder for the thing killing it. Sometimes an animal does not leave to say goodbye. Sometimes, leaving changes what death can take with it. And then there are elephants. Elephants make the whole question harder, because one of the best documented deaths in a wild social mammal does not look like withdrawal at all. In October 2003, in Samburu, Kenya, researchers observed an elderly matriarch named Eleanor. She was already weak when she collapsed onto the ground. Within minutes, another matriarch approached her. Her name was Grace. Grace was not a close member of Eleanor's family, but she stood over her, pushed her tusks beneath Eleanor's body and tried to lift her back to her feet. Eleanor stood briefly, then fell again. Grace tried again. For more than an hour, as daylight faded, she remained beside the fallen matriarch. She pushed her, guarded her, tried to get a dying animal to rise. Eleanor died the following morning, and even then, the encounters did not stop. In the following days, females from Eleanor's family and from several other families approached her body. Some touched her with trunks or feet, some investigated her remains. The interest was not limited to close relatives. The elephants did not behave as though a dying individual needed to disappear. They behaved as though her condition demanded attention. Separate experiments have found that African elephants pay unusual attention to elephant skulls and ivory compared with the remains of other large animals. This does not prove that elephants understand death as humans do. It does show that the body of a dead elephant is not simply another object in the landscape. For them, death can pull others closer. That is why the simple story fails. A cat hiding beneath a porch, an ant leaving a nest, an infected bee remaining in the cold, and an elephant surrounded by other elephants are not four versions of the same instinct. They are four different biological answers to a failing body. In companion animals, hiding can emerge from pain, confusion, vulnerability, or sickness behavior. There is no evidence that they withdraw to spare us a goodbye. In ants, withdrawal may protect a dense society from a dying worker remaining inside it. In parasitized bumblebees, leaving changes the temperature around a lethal invader developing within the body. In elephants, severe decline may draw social attention instead of isolation. So why do animals leave before they die? Sometimes because weakness makes hiding safer. Sometimes because illness changes behavior before death arrives. Sometimes because one dying body can endanger many living ones. And sometimes, the more revealing behavior is not leaving at all. It is another animal noticing weakness, crossing the distance between them, and trying to pull a failing body back to its feet. We want the disappearing cat to have made a final choice for us. We want its absence to mean it understood what was coming, and loved us enough to protect us from seeing it. Maybe that is asking the animal to carry our grief in addition to its own pain. The truth may be quieter. A sick animal does not need to foresee death to search for safety. A dying ant does not need a philosophy of sacrifice to remove risk from the nest. An elephant does not need a human concept of mourning to refuse to ignore a body that once mattered. The animal may not be explaining death to us. It may simply be revealing the deepest rule of the life it lived.